Hello, and welcome to our new analysis on Warcraft: The Beginning. First of all, let me get some things clear right away. This episode will mark an absolutely special and unique episode so far, because we will dig very deep into every aspect of the Warcraft movie and its likely performance at the box office. It's possible that we do such extended predictions or analyses sometime again in the future. So when you're enjoying this kind of extremely detailed analysis, let us know in the comments. Down in the description box, you can find all chapters of this video, so if you want to skip a part, feel free to do so and jump to the section you're most looking forward to. Enough intro talk, let's go. Warcraft: The Beginning is going to be a movie adaptation of the same called video game franchise Warcraft from the company Blizzard Entertainment. The franchise started its rise to fame back in 1994, 21 years ago, when Blizzard first released the video game Warcraft: Orcs and Humans. Blizzard released another 4 chapters with Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness and Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos, as well as one expansion packet for each part with Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal and Warcraft 3 The Frozen Throne, before their masterpiece World of Warcraft finally was released back in late 2004. The game rose to phenomenal fame and holds the record for the currently most subscribed MMORPG, which means massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and the record for the most popular MMORPG ever with 12 million subscribers back in the 4th quarter of 2010. After the original World of Warcraft, which is often named World of Warcraft Classic, Blizzard released another 5 expansions with The Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, and the latest, Warlords of Draenor. All in all, the World of Warcraft plot takes place in an extremely big and sophisticated fantasy world, with all elements we know from other big fantasy franchises like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Narnia and other stuff, but also with a lot of unique and ingenious ideas that fans all over the planet love and enjoy. Overall, it is fair to say that the number of World of Warcraft players went down constantly, just interrupted sometimes when a new add-on got released and a lot of old players were rushing back for a short period of time to try the new expansion out. All in all, the currently 5.6 million subscribers are the lowest amount of players since the 4th quarter of 2005. But the huge fan base and the still huge amount of players convinced Blizzard to hold on their plans of creating a real-life epic fantasy film on the fantasy universe. So, that should be enough to get a feeling on how big the World of Warcraft franchise is and how deep the roots are going into the gaming community. Now, let's take a look on the production history of the film Warcraft: The Beginning itself. The movie came a long way. Back in May 2006, Blizzard first announced that they will develop a live-action film on Warcraft with the help of the production company Legendary Pictures. 2 years later, at the BlizzCon 2008, it was told to the fans that the script is in the writing process and that everyone can be sure that the movie will not be rated G or PG. First, it was planned that the film should play during the times of Warcraft: Orcs and Humans. But since the Warcraft franchise became immensely famous because of World of Warcraft, and not because of the first few games, this idea was scratched really fast. First, the movie was set to be released in late 2009, but since time was running out, it was rescheduled for a release in late 2011. In summer 2009, it was announced that Sam Raimi, who has an extremely good box office reputation because of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy from 2002 to 2007, would be the director. But after a lot of years went by and really no news were released on the Warcraft movie, the very next news were that Sam Raimi announced that he will not direct the movie for his commitment to Oz the Great and Powerful, which was released in early 2013. In mid-May 2012, it was announced by Blizzard that the movie is not dead, but that it's still in treatment stage. So basically 6 years went by where pretty much nothing evolved from the Warcraft film idea. Then finally, in February 2013, it was announced that Duncan Jones will direct the movie and that more information will follow soon. During 2014, Blizzard and Legendary Pictures presented a concept trailer, a few concept art designs, It was announced that the plot will be about the first meeting of humans and orcs, and that Lothar and Durotan will serve as the main actors on each side of the film. Therefore, it was announced that the movie will portray both sides, the human side and the orc side, with the same amount of time. Between November and December of 2013, the whole cast was announced and principal photography began on January 13, 2014 and took 123 days to be finished. It was planned to be followed by a 20 weeks long post-production, but since they had to do 2 additional shoots after the principal photography and the post-production took longer than expected, the first set release date of summer 2015 was not possible and the film was pushed back to winter 2015 and after that pushed back again to May 2016 after it became clear that the movie would land on the same weekend as The Force Awakens. So you can notice pretty fast that the film has gone an extremely long way. It took Blizzard and Legendary all in all 10 years from the first announcement to the release of the film. Although that sounds not so good in the first place, it has shown in the last few years that publicity, even when the publicity is just that the film gets pushed back and pushed back and pushed back again, actually can help the box office run of the movie. A good example for that is World War Z, by the way. Alright, now let's take a look at the box office history of video games which made it into a film. Video game adaptions have a pretty bad box office history. Over the last 2 decades, especially since the year of 2000, studios often tried to create a financially successful video game adaptation, but they failed nearly every time. So, over the years, creating a video game adaptation has become a no-go for Hollywood studios. This is actually one of the reasons why the Halo movie by Peter Jackson never started to go into production. Studios just thought that the risk was too high to give a film based on a video game such a high budget. Prince of Persia, to name just one example, was another huge flop at the box office. It was really the first try by an Hollywood studio to transform a video game into a blockbuster-sized franchise. With a $200 million budget, Prince of Persia is by a far margin the biggest video game production ever, and it failed hard by only grossing $336 million worldwide, and thereby turning into a financial disaster for Disney. When video game adaptations were able to gross 2 times the production budget, they were mostly produced on a low budget level, something between $10 and $50 million, and most of them cracked the multiplier by the factor 2, only by a very small margin, so they still had to do big DVD and Blu-ray sales to get the marketing costs back in. One franchise that was able to be financially successful was the Resident Evil franchise. Nearly every part of the 5 installments grossed 3 times the budget and some of them even nearly 5 times the budget. But the Resident Evil movies were also cheap in the making, with Resident Evil Retribution being the most expensive with $65 million. So far, the only video game adaptation movie with a budget of over $100 million, which was still able to gross 2 times its budget, was the first Lara Croft movie from 2001, which was produced with a budget of $115 million. So you see, Warcraft the Beginning is, besides being the first try since Prince of Persia: Sands of Time to create a blockbuster franchise on a video game, one of the most important movies from the last years when it comes to the level of impact. The reason here is very clear. When Warcraft the Beginning not manages to convince the audiences and turns into a financial flop, which video game adaptation should be able to do it then? Warcraft is easily one of the most known and loved video games from the last 11 years. For us, there's no other game which would have such a big chance of turning into a huge franchise besides Warcraft. Also, when Warcraft fails, studios will be totally disgusted by the idea of taking a video game and turning it into a movie. Doesn't matter how big the franchise or how loved it is. So basically, Warcraft the Beginning is the theming in the future of a whole genre. So now we talked about the history of video game adaptations and how important Warcraft the Beginning is for the genre box office wise. Now, let's start with the analysis. Okay, let's get facts straight. Warcraft the Beginning will be released on June 10th in the USA and Canada. Because the movie will very likely get a PG-13 rating, we can expect a big wide release for the movie. Big franchise movies like Mockingjay Part 2, Age of Ultron, The Dark Knight Rises and Jurassic World are currently released in about 4,100 to 4,400 cinemas. That is the high end in terms of cinema count a movie can get. Warcraft The Beginning will most likely not land in this region, but a cinema count of 3,600 to 4,000 is pretty likely. In this analysis we work with the average, so 3,800 cinemas. When the production of Warcraft The Beginning started, it was planned that the movie will need a budget of $100 million. But there were a lot of news around the budget being exceeded multiple times. Current reports estimate the movie's budget to be somewhere between $150 to $180 million. So we take the average and consider Warcraft The Beginning to have a production budget of $165 million. The movie will be released in 2D and 3D, so higher ticket prices for the 3D shows will help the movie's performance a bit. Okay, so these are the facts that we will work with to predict the movie from now on. For Warcraft The Beginning, we want to present to you 3 possible outcomes: a pessimistic one, a realistic one, and an optimistic one. So let's start with the pessimistic outcome. In the first minutes of this video, we talked a lot about the fact that Warcraft has a huge fanbase, maybe the biggest fanbase of any video game out there. For this to be the biggest video game adaptation ever made, it takes a lot of risks of course, but we are pretty sure that fans of the Warcraft franchise don't have to fear any horrible outcome for the movie. A few people might say now, what about Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time from 2010? It was a video game adaptation with a huge budget of $200 million and it failed extremely to earn the money back. That's absolutely right. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time created a big hole in the wallet of Disney and it was a financial flop. Of course it can happen that Warcraft The Beginning will not achieve a break even with the cost spent on the movie, but it is close to impossible that the movie fails very hard on that quest, like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time did. Okay, let's talk about how much the movie has to gross so it breaks even with the costs. With an $165 million production budget, it is pretty realistic to assume that the movie will spend something between $50 and $80 million on marketing. So we take the average of $65 million and combined with the $165 million production budget, Warcraft The Beginning sits at a total of $230 million. In a lot of other analyses, we often mention the fact that only 50% of the whole earnings are going back to the studios. The other 50% are basically going to the cinemas and other people. That being said, it should be clear to everyone now that Warcraft The Beginning has to gross a huge $460 million worldwide to break even with its total costs. $460 million is a huge amount of money, and a lot of epics which were released in the last few years did not break that money mark, but the rescue for Warcraft in that situation would be its extremely big and loyal fanbase. Even when bad reviews are rolling in and most audiences are disappointed by the final movie, it will at least gross $420 million worldwide. There's basically no possible outcome where it will land anywhere lower just because of the loyal fanbase. Also, it has to be noted that there will be some blockbusters which will be released right after Warcraft, but they are not attacking the same kind of audience, so there are not really much films to hold Warcraft back. Also, Warcraft has a huge potential to be big in the Asian markets, especially in China, which is getting bigger and bigger each year in terms of box office and is currently the second biggest market right behind the USA. It's pretty safe that Warcraft will be huge there. Also, it does not really care if the movie gets great reviews or good word of mouth. In China, there were a few movies which got horrible reviews and received very bad word of mouth, but they were big anyways. To sum it up, we think the most pessimistic outcome would be a domestic total of $110 million and an overseas outcome of $310 million, which will combine to a total of $420 million worldwide. With this theory, Warcraft would land $20 million short to break even, but with Blu-ray sales and DVD sales a few months after the cinema release, it would probably break even. So what is a realistic scenario? The director of Warcraft The Beginning, Duncan Jones, has directed 2 feature films so far, Moon and Source Code. Both movies were well received by audiences and critics. Moon can even be recognized as one of the best sci-fi movies from the last 6 years. Both movies have a small budget and does not have the size of the Warcraft movie, but they both were able to gross their budget multiple times. so a talented director is standing behind the Warcraft project. Another very big factor with the Warcraft movie is the quality of the CGI. Since the trailer got released a few weeks ago, two camps has created themselves. 50% of all people are saying the CGI looks like crap. The other 50% are saying that the CGI looks amazing. There's nearly no one who's just saying that it looks alright. The VFX and CGI of Warcraft is being made by Industrial Light and Magic, or in short ILM. With that being said, it should be clear to everybody that the VFX and CGI will not look bad. And that the guarantee that the effects will look amazing is very big, because ILM are masters at their work. A few of their recent projects include Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Jurassic World, The Martian, and future projects will be Civil War, The Revenant, and a tiny little film that some of you might know as Star Wars The Force Awakens. So basically the statement that the CGI in Warcraft the Beginning will look bad is just wrong. Also, let's not forget that with a fantasy epic film, the audience will not be limited to just the Warcraft universe fans. Fans of The Lord of the Rings, Narnia, The Hobbit and other fantasy franchises will probably be interested in Warcraft the Beginning too, when reviews are coming in and the movie gets a certain positive reaction from critics. Furthermore, even with people who are absolutely not into video games, it is well known that World of Warcraft and the Warcraft franchise in total is a sensation on its own and some kind of different to the size of other video games. So what do we have? A director who has a good reputation box office wise and quality wise. A company who has a great, if not the best, reputation in CGI work, and that is really important for a film where the effects are basically the foundation. Also, the movie will attract a far bigger audience when reviews are kind of good. And let's not forget that Blizzard is well known to work on their projects until the final product is one of really great quality. Blizzard has proved this kind of work ethic a couple of times in the past, and it's realistic to consider that they will have the same work ethic when it comes to Warcraft the Beginning. Our final realistic prediction is $170 million in the USA and Canada and $410 million overseas, for a combined total of $580 million. With this theory, Warcraft the Beginning would land $60 million ahead of the point where the movie would break even and the financial profit would be good enough for a sequel or even two, with the DVD sales and Blu-ray sales also being big. Now, what is our optimistic prediction? Well, all of the arguments we just used in the realistic prediction can be converted kind of in our optimistic prediction. ILM doing the effects, big amount of audiences and no real competition so far in the weeks after the release are all arguments that point out that Warcraft the Beginning will have a good chance at an optimistic box office run. The key thing that Warcraft the Beginning has to do right is the quality. Warcraft has to overcome the status of just a video game movie to really gross a lot of money. This can only happen when the quality level is so high that audiences will just forget the factor of the video game and will watch it anyways. When the movie opens to an A or A- cinema score and has a rating of over 80% at Rotten Tomatoes, in our opinion that would be enough for Warcraft the Beginning to break that barrier. So how big can Warcraft get? It is very hard to put a limit on a movie's gross because basically everything can happen in every situation. We want to put the limit in the domestic market at $285 million. We don't think that anything above that will happen, and to gross even $285 million in the States and Canada would be extremely successful for Warcraft the Beginning. When it comes to the overseas market, it gets even more difficult. Warcraft can be so outstanding in China that all of our predictions are underestimating the movie, so we will give two different numbers. One for a good China performance and one for an outstanding China performance. A total of 520 million overseas is in our opinion a really good outcome, but still possible to happen, even without outstanding numbers in China. When China goes totally nuts about Warcraft the Beginning, we could see a final overseas outcome of $630 million. So we have the worldwide total numbers of $805 to $915 million when China performs great. One way or another, Warcraft has the power to become a big box office success. What do we personally think? We think an outcome a bit above the realistic prediction is the way to go. $180 million in the USA and Canada, and about $420 million overseas, for a combined total of $600 million. Our upcoming video will be an analysis about Star Wars Attack of the Clones, Gravity, or a prediction about Batman vs Superman. We hope you enjoyed this analysis. Be sure to hit a like and subscribe to our channel. You can also support us on the social networks listed below. See you soon. Bye bye.